You are listening to, and you are here with Race Matters, a show that I co-host. We're a program that holds space for conversations diving deep into the ways we understand and value the value and complexities of our racial identities. My name is Darren Lasagas. I'm also the head of programming and music at FBI Radio. It's a privilege to be holding a role like that, namely because by nature of independent and community radio, we're able to really push the limits and potentiality of radio as a format. Maybe not to the extent that in the movie that you just seen, we're not really plotting to take over the ABC by force anytime soon. Maybe Channel 9. We try and find small ways to resist that which is normalized around us, and we try and do that every day in very small ways. This right now in this room and being recorded for Radio 2 is one of those ways. So thank you so much for sharing this with us, and I want to give you an applause for that. Claps. Born in Flames, gorgeous experimental film directed by Lizzie Borden, released in 1983. In so many ways, this movie captures a moment in time. Yes, it's an imagined reality. It's a post-revolution and a multiplicity of active militant feminist groups, but as with any sci-fi utopia come dystopia work, it presents stylistically, symbolically, the reality that actually is there. When Honey says we are deconstructing and reconstructing, it sounds like she's inviting every audience who will ever watch this movie to take a step back and see this movie through their current lens, which is what we're doing now. You know, it's a basic question of do we or can we agree with this film today? Which parts do we bring forward into our present? Which parts need more questioning? And that's what we'll do today. This event is called Embers. Are they remnants of a fire or the start of one? With our special guests today, we'll touch on some central tenets of the film: radio, activism, solidarity, and the tensions of us coming together. Beyond that, we're just having a chat, honestly. Like it's a movie, you know, watching experience, and part of that experience is not just the movie. It's about spending some time after the movie. You know, what's that afterthought? What's that sitting in it with a little bit with our friends? So yeah, please sit back and let us meet our beautiful circle here. I'll get you to briefly, as briefly as you can, introduce yourselves, and we'll start with Aaliyah J. Bradbury here.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Aaliyah J. Bradbury, like you said. I am a Miriam Mir Larakia woman, so I'm Indigenous, but I was raised here in Redfern, and I'm a filmmaker, a writer, just a general creative. Yeah.
Prince.
Cool. Hi, I am Prince, also known as Amir. I, just to talk about my intersections, I'm Arab Assyrian. I'm also white passing, which I feel is an important affirmation or something to acknowledge. I am an artist. I am a primary school teacher and also an educator, and I'll probably use that interchangeably, teaching and education. So yeah.
Queen.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Queen G Kibone. That's how you know me. I'm a hip hop artist. Also, I have a background in community radio and broadcast, and also as a trainer. I work here at the Rattler as a program manager when I'm not on stage ripping rhymes and, you know, sending out messages of fierce activism and taking down the system.
Yeah. As we can hear, we all have such different experiences and practices, and throughout the chat we're going to hear how this comes together or digresses in different ways and meaningful ways. Let's open the first question to you all. We just watched Born in Flames, 30 years after its release. What's something that is resonating with you right now? And Aaliyah, we'll start with you.
Thank you for putting me in the firing line. You know what's... I think this idea of intersectionality, I mean, Prince already brought it up, which thank you for bringing it up very quickly. We're in a place where we're all kind of striving for this idea of unity, but we are all coming from different experiences, different worldviews, different cultures. You know, we don't all start off at the same place, but we all want to get to the same place, whatever that may be or whatever that may look like, which is essentially just equality or equity. So that's what really resonated with me first. But What do you guys think?
Let's go with you, Prince.
Cool, thanks. I feel like there's so much that resonated with me, but just to perhaps talk about one thing that was quite powerful was the conversations that were had, and perhaps how it moves outside of, or perhaps interrogates this kind of leftist ideology, which really resonated for me, that it's not about that leftist ideology, but it's about so many intersections coming together, listening, actively listening, and also another thing that came up for me was also the self-defense aspect, which I would love to continue to talk about or touch on further in our conversations as well.
Yeah, it's really great to be here. I think today's a beautiful gathering of everybody coming to watch this film together, and it's a good reminder of, you know, where we are in the discourse. I think for me, a lot of the themes that came up are still happening. We're still having these conversations, just with a different generation, which is, you know, quite. You know, it's quite moving to see that you know, there's a lot of these issues, and even though a lot of liberations happened, and, you know, women's rights and movements has, you know, been a shift in different ways, there's still a lot of this going on. But I think for me, one of the things that came up, Marek will pause while we have an aeroplane go over our head. How do we get together if we can't come together? You know, this thing of getting ourselves together first. Making sure that we're ready and we're fit for the fight, and then gathering people, and then coming together. So, you know, there was that scene where one of the sisters there was not down with this women's movement, with this, you know, women's army and stuff, where, you know, the other sister was. And I think that's something that, you know, I find relating a lot is, you know, sometimes we're, you know, in our groups or in our different parts of our lives, and, you know, maybe not everyone's going to agree with us, but it's not maybe everybody's job to be that fighter. You know, everyone takes their different positions in society, and for those who do choose to use their time and their energy to speak up and speak against, and what they have to endure and go through after that because of that, is definitely something that is relatable. That thing of, you know, everyone who was in that film that was standing up against something wasn't somehow being some other way, you know, they were being put down, but they didn't care. You know, you got to keep going. So, yeah, that was something that I found really moving.
Yeah, and I guess that's an idea that we'll bring forward into this chat, the idea of getting together and coming together. And, you know, there's a slight difference between those two terms. But what does it mean when they exist in unison? I guess, Prince, let's pull on that thread a little bit in terms of self-defense. There is a line that, you know, the elder who is playing a huge role in this movie says, "The oppressed have a right to violence. It's like a right to piss. And you just need to find the right place and the right time in the context, and that is your right to exercise." How does that sit with you?
Yeah, thanks for pulling on the thread. Yeah, I feel as though, in speaking from experience in regards to self-defense, I guess there's been a history of feeling quite shamed and quite guilty about any kind of moving into a space of self-defense, but feeling like I personally have had no choice but to utilise those ways of protection. I was reading a book by Lama Rod Owens. I can imagine a lot of people may have read it or may have not. But he speaks to give it some context. He's a practicing Buddhist, but he's also a queer black man, and he speaks about self-defense in a way that is an act of love, an act of love for community, an act of love for self. But also when we move into a space of self-defense, is to do it in a way that we hold accountability for one another. So have those conversations in self-defense, about self-defense, talk about it, come together, because, you know, at the end of the day, not doing it alone, but also having that person to turn to, having that kind of accountability that I mentioned earlier as well. I'm all for self-defense. I think it's such an important way to practice love, but using it in a way that isn't violent for violence sake, but using it as a way as protection.
I love that.
Yeah.
Elia, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from. I grew up, so, you know, like I said, I'm Indigenous, and I grew up amongst different communities, especially regional and remote, where my family's from in Darwin, so in the Northern Territory and in Arnhem Land. And we still do those kinds of things of, like, you know, if a cousin's maybe in a fight, you know, maybe you will jump in at all times, you know, you don't think twice. And I think there's something really kind of beautiful in that sometimes where, you know, this idea of, like, you can't back your own community, you know, you can't fight for them because it's seen as something very other or, like, it's kind of animalistic, and that all kind of stems from very kind of racist and very sexist ideals of how a person should be, because it's that idea of, like, I'm the intellectual other, I'm the superior person, but sometimes, you know, you have to fight for your life, and you're allowed to fight for your life, and I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, that sense of permission, I think, is what's resonating from the film. I can feel us already extrapolating, you know, ideas and themes from a movie that existed or that came out 30 years ago into our present day now. I want to play with this idea that Honey gives us at the end of the film, deconstructing to reconstruct. What would you reconstruct or reimagine about this film if it was set now? And Queen, maybe I'll throw it to you first.
With this film, I think it's set in a similar time to what we're going through now around inflation. You know, I think we got to remember that, and all the different dysfunctions that are happening around us, all the different, you know, issues that we're having, the, you know, the injustices, the justices, the things that we want. We're collectively going through something together, which is this ridiculousness of inflation, and we shouldn't ignore that. I think we shouldn't be okay with paying so much for things. We shouldn't be okay with, you know, this cost of living, this rising. It's really wrong. It's really ridiculous. And we are a generation that are really going through it, even though they were going through it then. Look what they were doing about it. And I feel that we need to, you know, really do something about it a bit more than we are individually, because we're actually all just sitting around waiting for someone to tell us, you know, when to do it, how to do it, why we should do it. And one thing we see in this film is that, you know, these women get together and they say, we're not going to take this. You know, if it means that we've got to arm up ourselves, if it means we've got to go travel across the world to learn from what other people are doing, if it means that we need to, you know, just stop going to work, you know, this thing of, you know, I often imagine going, like, you know, part of, if we all stopped work, if we all just stopped everything, you know, like, they have these things for us now that's keeping us all distracted and, you know, looking down the rabbit hole and ignoring the reality of what's really happening. And, you know, I think that if we really stopped everything, stopped getting up, stopped going to work, pulled our money out of the bank, you know, just doing those radical things that don't require being violent, that don't require, you know, doing things that maybe we're too shy to do, but, you know, together, if we all do that, we will dismantle this, you know, this system, this thing that's collectively holding us back. You know, we're going to the local supermarket, I won't mention the names of them, you know, and they're offering you, pay $30, every $30 you spend, you get 3 cards for your kids to go and put into a folder and a magazine, and all this stuff. So yeah, I think that we, you know, could really learn a lot from that film, and how, you know, the boldness that women had to, like, get up and just not take it anymore. Yeah, and if we could really, you know, reconstruct and deconstruct, one of those things is to pull out, you know, stop making the wheel turn. And it's scary to say, because look what happens when you do that. They get the FBI on you, they get the, you know, the government officials, and we've been feared. We've been taught to fear that. We're worried that, you know, we won't get our Centrelink pay if we don't do something. Why are we worried for, you know? Why, you know, if you know how to do something, you know how to do something, let's do it collectively together. But do we really have the, and it's not a weakness or anything like that, but, you know, when are we going to to do that? When are we really going to stop and really not going to take it? Hope that can answer the question.
How about you, Prince? What would you reimagine about this film if it was set today?
I guess it's something that I believe when Sharika introduced the film, touched on a real binary, a binary way of being or seeing. I guess as a trans person, a trans person who was also socialised as a female, so I have experiences that resonates with me deeply when I watch the film, but also there's trans voices missing in the film as well. So it would be great to also hear more conversations, specifically centred around trans women of colour, sister girls, and also, more non-binary voices as well. And perhaps, something that came up for me was like perhaps more conversations around healthy ways of doing masculinity. So we talk about, everything in the film was so incredibly profound in the way that it was discussed and spoken about, and from different experiences and dimensions. It would also be quite incredible to hear, not to still de-center masculinity or men, but to have conversations around how healthy masculinity can be part of a conversation as well.
Elia, how about you?
I was definitely having a little bit of think, like Queen and Prince touched on some really beautiful points about more diverse voices, about just really being radical and being, trying to have the space for those kind of radical conversations and just really kind of checking out of the system. I think I would love to see some kind of idea around creating a culture, because my feminism, my activism is rooted within a very cultural space. And I think that's something that we are severely lacking in the world right now, is this idea of creating space that is connecting to something much older than us and creating something that will lead us into the future. And within this film, there isn't any Indigenous voices represented. There was one line, and even that was technically a slur. So I would love to incorporate that in that particular film, but I would also love to see time where people create spaces for joy, especially in radical movements. We are always being on the receiving end and feeding into systems that will always kind of keep us on this one-track mind. And then, it's not necessarily, for me, I don't think it's necessarily sustainable, because I've seen what it has done to people who are living now, who were part of those movements at that time, and how they feel like they've lost a community because, they've lived longer, or they haven't created time or space to sort of indoctrinate younger people into that. So I would really love to have like a little bit of a cultural moments of joy. Yeah.
Yeah, word. Absolutely. Just what you bringing that up, but also just looking at the time and what was accepted as normal. I always find interesting when you watch things that take place, 30 years ago in the 80s, and you just see what, what's normally accepted, like, people openly talking about, even the thing about women being harassed, and I love that. I love that I like the women on the bikes going around blowing whistles and being disruptive and things like that. And I think that, we could see more of that in
that's
today's
very
time.
of its time.
Things like that. I think, the timing of what, was once, and not to say that it is normal, but it's just really interesting, like how things like shock us when we see it, and we go, oh, that's, we don't have to look, but why is that? Because people had to go through these times of, normalizing things that are completely unacceptable, and just because it was normal doesn't mean it was acceptable. I think that's also something that I'm seeing as well, is just because you think that, if being being oppressed or not being seen in society, being queer, being othered is, was something that was just standard way of behavior. Doesn't mean that it was acceptable. Doesn't mean that people are okay with it,
I want to talk about modes of disruption in this next bit of the chat and talk briefly about the power of radio in this film. It's a space that becomes a site of tension and resistance. It's about amplifying voices as much as it is listening to voices and sharing them. The context we exist in now is so saturated with information, and yet these ideas of radio still resonate. I mean, we have radio people in the room, we have radio people on this panel right now, especially for marginalized communities. Queen, we'll go back to you. How have you experienced radio as a tool to cut through all the noise that we have to process?
Radio really saved my life. I think radio is something that made me see the power in our voices as individuals, and in this age of too much information, we should really go back to going to our source. Who are we listening to, who are our narrators? And I think it's important, for everyone here who is making media, that you are the people that we go to for what we need to know, for information. Because you're the ones that are dedicating yourself. It's something that I think a lot of us who do radio have in common. We have this passion and this want to tell stories, depending on why you're in this for your own reasons. But for me, one thing that I love about making media, and that's why I enjoy passing it on and training people to do it, because it really is our one place where we can amplify the message, amplify the story, tell people what's happening, give people the information. I really love how radio has always been that. And I think, with this, we have too much going on. It's really too much. It's too much channels. It's too much, even podcasting is great that there's this podcast, but how do we focus on the message? How do we focus on the issue? Things are moving too quickly. We're having one major issue and it's full trauma-based stuff, and then we quickly move on to the next thing, and we haven't even dealt with that. And I think, what I would really love to see is that we go back to, lesser sources of information and trust in our broadcasters, our public broadcasters who have been placed there to send out those messages, and that be our place to call for, because, it's really the media makers who are the movers, the shakers and narrators of all the discourse, of all the things that are happening, whether even if it's music. I'm a hip hop artist as well. I write music, but it was from doing radio. I did that first. I was producing radio more first than I was actually producing music. But when I realized that, I can play my friends, they're not being played. We're complaining, how do you get onto the mainstream? Forget about the mainstream. I've got a radio show here. I've got some friends. I know some really talented people who have some really good music. I'll put them on. And I think that's what's really powerful about places like FBI Radio and all the different community radio stations that are around, is that they're the ones that we should be, getting our source from, our information, our herd. Like, talk to people who have radio shows. Go out and talk to people, see what people are doing, because there is so much happening out there within the community. But I also feel that a lot of it is not being amplified through the radio airways, because we're in the digital space too much, and that's where we're hoping to see things first. So I hope that answers the question. I think just a message out there for everyone, like, go back to the radio, turn it back on, and find the people who are dedicating their time for free most of the time, volunteering. And it's a lot. But I like to train people, because I didn't get formal training. I just, like I said, it saved my life. I had left school and I had nothing to do, and that's how I ended up on radio. Like, I had nothing to do, and I was just like, I've got to tell my dad something by Monday. It's Friday and I need to tell him I'm doing something with my life. And I just got this opportunity. I was like, cool. And was it for me. It was like, I can just tell I want to do something with my life, and I'm not going to be sitting there on Monday with nothing. And years later, this is what it's done for me.
Aaliyah, you come from a lineage of broadcasters. How's the experience of radio for you?
Yeah, radio it's kind of really lovely. I mean, I like to say that I come from a long line of storytellers. I mean, story is so important in the Indigenous culture. It's our dreaming, it's our jugurra. It tells us, where we come from and how we were formed and what our role is in this world. And I think we've all taken that sort of sense within my family to the places of media where we sort of distribute that same story. We know that our story is our duty to the community, and it's the idea of creating space and creating legacy that will continue on even long after us. I mean, how many times have we, this film is it within itself is a testament to how story is everlasting and eternal. So I think that's something really lovely about that. And, given that I come from a long line of that, I like the idea that maybe I could create something that maybe will touch upon you. I mean, this right now is doing exactly that. I may say something that resonates with you, or you may like something that I might say, and you will maybe have a conversation with that amongst your friends. And it's that idea of, again, you're doing the exact same thing that I've been taught by my ancestors. It's that idea of everlasting story. So my story will now become a part of your story, and hopefully, we can come back together in another time or something like that. But yeah.
Beautiful. The sense of urgency and activism in this film is so potent. It's so clear what is at stake. Prince, I want to turn to you and talk about the work you do as both a primary school teacher and artist. How do we begin to expand our idea of what that activist frontline is?
Cool. I'll probably speak more in the lineage of teaching because it feels like a bit more of a potent example. But yeah, I wrote here that teachers are frontline actors negotiating the social issues of our time. So we could either be teachers who use it as a tool of disempowerment, or we can be a teacher that subverts that in many ways. It's really difficult to operate as a teacher within these structures of racism, white supremacy, classism, capitalism, all those isms, and all those phobias. What I have learned, I guess, as a teacher, is you can't do it alone, definitely. So you need to find your people. If there's any teachers out there, hit me up. I would love to have conversations. Sorry, I forgot my train of thought. But what I've also learned is that I can close the classroom door and we can engage in truth-telling. We can engage in spaces of camaraderie. We can perhaps subvert those systems in ways where it's not disciplinary, it's not punitive, but instead we actively listen. One of my fundamental rules within teaching, I don't have that many rules. We have perimeters or we have ways of being together, but one of my fundamental rules is what's my fundamental rule? My fundamental rule that I use all the time, that I've absolutely forgotten, is this is what nervous little stuff is how do we? Sorry, guys. Sorry, I just read it in my pocketbook.
Go back to the book.
You can tell she's a
But
teacher.
I've written
She's
so
got
many
those
notes, and now I'm like, where the fuck is her? Oh my god! Oh, here we are. No one could ever interfere with anyone else's learning, and because it's such an incredible rule to unpack, and I begin with that, but then we unpack it, and the unpacking starts with how do we create cultural safety? How do we create safety? Why do we not disrupt other people's learning? We talk about consent. We talk about bullying. We talk about the ways that we hold space for one another. Probably not hold space. I, as a teacher, will hold space, and I think holding space means facilitation and mediation, and I think that's my role as a teacher. But how do we listen to one another, and how do we engage in ways where we can do conflict well? Conflict is going to come up again and again, and as a teacher, you see it. I'm teaching kindergarten class at the moment, and I can tell you conflict is every fucking minute. Like, it's like, Brian didn't let me, Brian kicked the seat, and now I'm like, just like there's a conflict every moment. So it's how do we do conflicts well? I have a lot more to say, but I've just gone a little bit blank. But yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. I'll continue.
Let's continue. Yes. Snaps. A lot of the work that you all do is an extension of that, an extension of facilitating a place where people's learning are not interfered with. And it's bringing complex ideas and skills to different communities. It's all well and good to talk about these complex ideas in spaces like this right now. How have you all made sure that no one is left behind in your respective communities? And Queen, maybe let's start with you.
Wow. Yeah, I really just love everything you were just saying, Prince, about education, because we're very blessed that we are in a generation where there's actually some decent educators out there, and I think they've always been. I think it's sad that we've had a time, or maybe still have times, where we look at teachers in a negative way, and we shouldn't do that because we really spend most of our lives with these people. So it's really refreshing that to hear your approach to teaching, and because we have children that we're raising, that we are being put in these systems, and we can't completely shut them off, right? We can't completely destroy them, but how do we go inside and change them and fix them? And I think that's probably why when it comes to this thing of activism and why we do what we do, because we've gone through things. I'm someone who's self-education. I've taught myself a lot of things from scratch, and that's why I appreciate the idea of training, the idea of educating, because I still feel that we need to learn and have our mentors and have our elders and people who have been through the thing that we're trying to get through and experienced it to tell that. So even though I had a different experience with education where it wasn't so positive for me, I didn't throw that aside. I went, okay, I'm going from the inside to change it, to fix it, and do something about that. But it's not easy to bring everyone along. Everyone has their journey, everyone has their path, and it's why we're not here to change. You can't change people, you can't fix people. People are going to be who they are. They've come from their own journey, they've got their own path, that's brought them to this day. So maybe when we've met them in their time now, they're not the greatest person to deal with or greatest person to get along with. But it doesn't mean that, my ideas have to shift this thing. So I'm someone that I don't believe in we should change people's way of thinking. I don't think that if someone doesn't believe in climate change that we should go and convince them to believe in it. But what can we do about it? What can we do to contribute towards it? What can we do with our individual time and space while we're here on this planet? I think that's how we don't leave people behind, is when we lead by example and take action in any way we can. And again, it's not everyone's job. I used to be really annoyed when, in the decolonization journey you go through, you get to this point where you start going, those people are not standing up and they're not joining us. And I'd get really annoyed at one point, where today I look back and I don't have an issue with that. I can sit in the same room with someone that I completely disagree with and have a healthy conversation about it and get on with it and get through it. And maybe that person has a little seed has dropped in them, and I've also learned something. It's a two-way thing. So it's hard to say, how do we bring everyone along with us? I think it's what we leave behind. It's what we leave on the path, the little memory, the message, the time. And that's why art is so beautiful. Art is timeless. This film is timeless. There's a lot of things in this film that, as I said earlier, we're still going through today. But every song that's been made, every picture that's been painted, it doesn't matter when we see it, it's still seen. It's still existing. And I think, that's why a film like that's been made 30 years ago, Race Matter, Sharika, your crew, everyone, like the fact that you brought this into 2023 is also a very significant thing to do, because we who are sitting here for the first time watching it get to experience that as if it was today, as if it was made yesterday. Like, to us, it's still the first time. Art and everything the art is timeless, and the music and the stories and the songs is always going to be here.
Aaliyah, how about you? In the way that you tell stories through your work at Radio Skid Row, but also beyond that, how do you ensure that no one's left behind?
Sorry. I think there is something to first acknowledge, what is the thing that is holding us back? What is the thing that is sort of keeping us separate and disconnected? And I think naming that is so powerful. I mean, everything that we do is because of colonialization and oppression and how those intergenerational traumas affect not just, the people who are oppressed, but the people who are benefiting off that. And, I think once you start viewing that, and, my little theory is that, whiteness is inherently about categorizing people and keeping them separate because of that. But from a very cultural lens, it is about, you may be different, but how do we connect? And that idea of connection, and, you may be from a different place, I might be saltwater, you might be freshwater, but there is a time and space for us to have those deep conversations. And, we used to call it bungles, but right now we are kind of doing that. We are creating spaces where so many different voices can come together and, create ceremony like this. We can have really in-depth conversations. We can make art. We can tell stories. And that, to me, that's really important, because everything starts off with, hi, hello. I want to see you as a human first. And that idea of connection is sort of what I take on to, all my projects. I mean, I've got a series that I was working on in the writer's room for Netflix, and it is inherently a very typical middle-aged, white woman who's girl bossing her way, and she's a hot mess express. Fuck up, oh, we get it. It's there's 50 other stories like that. We get it. We've seen it. But I'm not a haterade, but low key about it. And speaking my truth. But in the writers' room, it wasn't inherently diverse. There was a lot of older millennial, that kind of thing. And, I was over here being oh, okay, I'm the titter in the corner. I see that. We see this. We clock each other. And there was probably 2 other people of colour. So it was really kind of interesting seeing how they understood story, and, that idea of really kind of categorizing people and creating distance, because that's their worldview. But me as an Indigenous woman, I'm can't they all love each other and let's all get along and all that kind of stuff? But it's really important, because at the end we were able to create something that was really quite beautiful. And even though I don't have their experiences, their stories became a part of my story, and my story became a part of their story, and we were able to bring something that could be seen as a little bit more universal. It's that idea of endless story and sacred story that I was talking about earlier on, and what you were talking about, Queen, of that timelessness. So, yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, I mean, everyone claps. We speak about this idea of, what we do, not leaving people behind, but in many spaces, like the space that you talk about earlier, it's us who gets left behind. What does it mean to, forge a new story? And you are literally rewriting narratives in the work that you do, so that there's no one left behind in any regard. I have one more prompt before we wrap up our talk today, and I want to speak and stay with these ideas of the everyday and touch on the mundane and tender moments that are collaged throughout Born in Flames as events throughout the film. There's conversations in fire staircases, a cigarette shared over a windowsill. There's, chicken being packaged in a factory. There's a penis being put a condom on. That's so mundane. What are the ways you think about resistance, not as an event, not as blowing up the World Trade Center, but what are ways you think of resistance as an everyday embodied practice? And Prince, we'll start with you.
Yeah, my world and my art practice and my teaching, everything is in the spiritual. It's a spiritual practice. Also, embodiment is the root to my practice, my everyday. So, silence is a big thing for me. Stillness is a huge practice for me as well. And in that stillness, there's stillness as movement, but movement as stillness. So I could be flowing, but I'm actually quite still within. Or I could be sitting still and I could be observing the movement in my body. So that means the movement of thought, the movement of blood flow, the movement of pain bodies. So for me, embodiment, to be embodied means to be able to practice spirituality in the true sense of the word as well. And also walking is also a huge practice of mine, and in walking is an embodiment, is understanding through walking, through embodiment, is also being able to understand place and understand self. And to understand self is to be able to practice, to understand self and a process of self-actualization makes me a better teacher, an educator, and person in the world. That's all I have to say about this.
Thank you, Prince.
Yeah.
Queen, how about you? How do you approach this idea of everyday acts of resistance?
The thing that I've got repeated in my head is my existence is resistance. My existence is a vision, my existence. How can I social distance my existence? My existence is continuously, consistently the victor. My existence in this system, criminally conflicted, my existence. Depicted in narratives as savages, my existence, transcribe my existence. We must carry the light. That's something that it's a royal rhyme. And yeah, because that's what it is. Writing, leaving these, messages behind to understand, what is going on in the now, in the here, in where we are. We can't fix the problems, like you said. We can't answer the question with blow up the world trade and, blow stuff up. I wish, that's a great solution, but it does nothing. But I think remembering those who have come before, remembering what has already been trialed to make the changes, and also just to, how we manage our daily, when we get up every day, just to give thanks, and to look at those who are going through it, it's still happening. There's there's women in Iran, in Afghanistan, in everywhere around the world that Born in Flames days is still happening today. Like they're still in that time where they can't do a lot of things that we can do. So I think just remembering that what little time that we have here, and how we spend it and cherish it, and not to worry about these these everyday systems and these things that pressure us, that we have to have the latest this and we have to do all these things, and if we don't, we're missing something. And going back to culture, ancestry, ancestors, there's a lot of spirits and guides who are within our reach every day, but we just have to reach out and see it. So the light, the flames, the fire, it's been a lot of that happening around. Shout out to Nancy Dennis's Mapule show, which is, basically means I am on fire. And what is it that comes out of fire? The ashes, and what happens to the ashes. And this is very deep, and so is this program. So much respect.
Aaliyah, let's end with you. Tell us about your everyday acts of resistance.
Sorry, that was so beautiful. I was actually going to say the exact same thing as you. That's why I did the little, I feel seen. Because my existence is literal resistance. I mean, if my ancestors didn't fight for everything that they have, I wouldn't physically be here, I would be extinct. So I think that's something that is so powerful, is like remembering that each and every one of you was born out of the blood, the sweat, the tears, the love, the happiness, the joy, everything that was your ancestors is you now, and you have that opportunity to remember that, you know, take moments to be still within your source, to then create that and maybe create that spark that will, you know, cause little fires, little embers, you know. And being able to really give that on to somebody else, I think that's really, really powerful. And also, like, shout out to my friend Louie, who I love so dearly. Being a silly goose. I think, you know, that idea of when a world is so sad sometimes and you're constantly being fed, you know, really kind of traumatic stuff, we get desensitized to that. You know, we think that's the normal. I mean, it is the normal, but it shouldn't be the normal. And so taking time to remember your joy and your happiness, that is such an act of resistance. You are allowed to be happy. You are allowed to dream. You are allowed to be so much more. So do that. Be happy. Be joyful. Express everything that you want. Reach for all the things that you intend to do. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Let's wrap it up there, because what a beautiful sentiment to end today on. Can you please give one more round of applause to our speakers? Queen G, Aaliyah J. Bradbury, and Prince. A few other thank yous. Thank you to Lizzie Borden herself and Cinema Nova in London for making this screening possible. Queen and Viv and the Red Rattler for inviting us. As you would know, Race Matters is run by volunteers, so shout out to Samantha, Tim, Ice, Jessica, Tubes. Special shout out to Alicia Zhao for the incredible artwork that you've seen throughout this whole program. Thank you, Alicia. Lachlan on tech and Ross for filming. Judy from Love and Peace Catering, thank you for the amazing, nourishing food. That was so yummy. Sammy, Professor, and Ya for setting up the space. Tanya Ali for the music before and during. And thank you all so much for coming. It's been a huge dream of ours to do a program and a film screening like this, and it only makes sense when it's shared with other people. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
It's not over, though. So as some of you might know, this is Darren's last show with Race Matters. Maybe you came here because you're familiar with what the Red Rat does, and you know they throw some pretty great events. So just a bit of context, Darren, alongside Tanya Ali, Sarah Khan, Georgia and Ryan, started Race Matters as an intervention into the kind of colonial and white supremacist bullshit that does happen even in an independent and, you know, somewhat underground kind of media source. And I think there is something really admirable about being able to see someone like Darren seamlessly hold a conversation with such potency and care and intrigue. But I also want to kind of honor that it's such an important labor that I feel like is so rare. You know, we have people stepping down from mainstream institutions still traumatized from the effects of racism. So to be able to hold a space that is anti-racist, that is queer, that is visionary, and to share that with such incredible speakers and with you all, I think this is such a beautiful way to finish off 5 years of your tenure of this show. Come into the light. Very fitting that I just came into the light, because what I was about to say was when I applied to be the producer of Race Matters, I was really happy to be putting anti-racist values into research. and just like was really interested in processes of radio, and we've seen, you know, the impact of that in a film like Born in Flames. And for kind of unexpected reasons, I stepped onto the mic when I thought I didn't have a voice. And so much of me finding my voice is because of you. And yeah, like people like Tanya and so many people here that I'm so sorry I don't have time to name, and like I'm obviously breaking down. Radio has saved my life, and like it's because of the friendships that I've been able to forge since moving back to this city. So thank you, and I think having a team to kind of have those intergenerational and like ongoing and everlasting stories that manifest, you know, what we do in the studio into something far beyond that space. Yeah, I think is just such a testament to all the labor and care that you've put into this. And yeah, I think let's just like give Darren one huge round of applause for being able to do that. We have something for you. The wonderful Tim, who's like kind of stepped into like this next generation of what Race Matters is, and you know, it's really significant that 5 years on, just because our incredible hosts have moved on doesn't mean that this platform will dissolve. And yeah, I'm just really honoured that I get to be part of taking care of the process of putting forward so many voices in this community. And yeah, thank you all for letting us do that as well. Yeah. Okay, we're done.
Can we all thank Sharika for this beautiful sentiment? Yeah, thank you. Yes, carry on and keep rising.
Wow, that was really, thanks. You two fucking killing it.